Welcome to the Surgical Assistant Podcast, a podcast crafted by surgical assistants for surgical assistants, where professionalism meets passion. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Surgical Assistant Podcast. I'm Kelly, and as usual, joined by John. How are you today, John?
Hey, everybody. I'm good, Kelly.
Good. And today we have a special guest with us, Rob Blackstone. He is joining us from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. A long ways from where John and I are in Florida. And we are so happy to have you, Rob. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome, and welcome to virtual Idaho. I wish I could camera and show you like what Idaho looks like a little bit, but
I do too. I was telling you before we started that it's a state on my list of states I want to visit. I've never had the opportunity to go to Idaho. But we are talking to Rob today about something very exciting. He has started an FA program there in Idaho at the College of Western Idaho. And so this is a program for first assisting, another accredited great program in the United States that we can offer prospective students. And you can look into this program if you're not a first assistant yet and are looking into it and want to know more about it. This episode is going to be very helpful to you. He's going to give us all the good insight, ins and outs of the program there. And we cannot wait to get started with this. So I think that we're going to go ahead and have you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your history professionally, and as your career in first assisting, how it got started. It sounds like you and I kind of started around the same time with our first assisting career. And just tell us, give us that background, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, and Kelly, happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, thank you. Today,
Yes, Kelly. Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah,
And
thanks so much.
Mother's Day to all the mothers out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my journey, started way back in the early 2000s with being a surgical technologist, going through my surgical technology school at the College of Southern Idaho. And after I had been working as a surgical technologist in the hospital for a couple of years, one of my good friends approached me and said, "Hey, we have a new orthopedic surgeon coming to town, and he's fresh out of school, he's fresh out of his training, and he needs an assist. Like, would you be interested?" And I'm like, I did a lot of orthopedics at the time, so I'm yeah, why not? Let's give it a try. So I kind of learned in the traditional sense that we did years ago, kind of on the job. And so I kind of learned his way of doing things. And of course that blossomed into, as I'm helping him, then the other docs are like, "Oh, hey, I could use some help too." And so then I started assisting them, and it just there was a few of us at the hospital that just kind of started that way. Credentialing at the time was never even really on my radar. It wasn't until I started teaching in surgical technology that it I saw the value in getting credentialed, and I had the opportunity at the time to test out. You remember when we could do that through the NBSTSA? It's kind of funny. Back then you had to qualify the cases you had done by documentation. You had to, I think it was like 300 cases in a 3-year period or something like that. And when I pulled it was like something like 600 total joints in.
Wow.
And then there were some laparoscopic cases in there too, but in general cases. But, I went through that. I sat for the NBSTSA exam, got credentialed. I believe it was around 2012, and had just been assisting, scrubbing, and teaching ever since. Over the last, since probably 2010, I've been teaching in surgical technology. It wasn't until 22 that I made the switch to surgical assisting and starting this program.
Okay. All right. Very good. I like that. You've got that bit of diversity there, John, right? We talk about credentialing a lot, but we also recognize that on the job training there's a lot of validation in that. And we receive a lot of our training, even after becoming first assistants, we still continue to receive a lot of training directly from surgeons. And that's a real and valid pathway to becoming a first assistant. I'm impressed that you passed that exam with just with your, I mean, that test was so hard for me. Oh my gosh.
It really was. Like, I sat down at that thing and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what have I got myself into?
What have I done?" Yeah.
And I was 100% sure that I failed it.
Yeah,
I
same.
walked out of there, and then the gal that had my results, she's like, "Oh, I don't quite know how to read this. It looks like I'm just give it to me." And then it took me a minute to find that passed.
Right. Oh gosh. Well, that's so all right. So that you were heavy, heavy in orthopedics, obviously, with your actual
Yeah.
applicable experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say like a lot of orthopedics, and then that kind of transitioned to like some spine and then some neuro stuff as well. And then, like I said, just kind of like once other surgeons kind of catch a whiff that you helping this one surgeon doing a good job with them, then they're like, I need some help too, and it just kind of takes off from there. I always tell my students, even when I was mostly when in surgical technology, I would say you're a walking resume. Like how you
Mhm.
conduct, how you carry yourself, your skills, how you ask questions, how you prepare for cases. Like that's all everyone's looking at that, whether they think they're looking at it or not. Like people take notice. And so if you can do that in a way that you're doing your self justification, you're doing yourself a good service of preparing, then people take notice and they want a piece of that.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely true. We kind of preach that in a roundabout way all the time. I love that term, a walking resume, and that's what yeah, it's your perfect opportunity to put yourself out there and let the world read you and see what you're made of and what you're capable of. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. So what John, just jump in here if you have any questions. I wanted to ask him to go from there. We're going to ask him and see then at what point did you recognize a need or for a first assisting program in your state? And yeah, because you didn't. So, and what I just heard you say, so you didn't really go through a formal first assisting program. We're going to recap that. You had on the job training, you had the knowledge, the practical experience, you were able to prove those cases. And that was in the day several years ago that they allowed for that pathway that MBS TSA did and allowed you to test out, and that's what you did. And again, I'm impressed with that because I needed all the formal education and textbook training and studying I could get, and still felt like I had bombed that test, and thank God I didn't. Um, but then and then take us from there. So you got into the educational side of it. So, of course, your brain is gonna think from the first assisting education, standpoint.
Yeah, yeah. So, like I said, years and years of a program director of surgical technology programs. I have a lot of passion for both professions. This is going to sound kind of one of those. I love to just keep pushing myself. And so, whatever I can do to kind of help myself improve and help myself like push myself for new challenges, right? And
Mhm.
so, I have been through in my teaching career. I taught a program that was struggling to get accredited, and I was able to figure out accreditation. Like that was my first introduction to accreditation, um, and I was able to kind of help get that program accredited. And then I took over a program that had been just doing really well, and I was able to maintain that. And then I moved to Northern Idaho. I was asked to come to Northern Idaho to start a surgical tech program, and that was the first time that I even looked at starting a program like from scratch. And that was a unique experience. It took me about a year to kind of put everything together, build the lab, get all of the contracts with the hospitals, the affiliation agreements, start the accreditation process from scratch. And just kind of a side note, I've actually for ARCS TSA, I've actually been a site visitor for them since 2012. So
Okay.
I've visited other programs. I've been a team chair with that organization as well. I even worked for them for a brief stint. And so going into North Idaho College to start that surgical tech program was a very unique experience. And this is going to sound like Liam Neeson a little bit, but it gave me, a special skill set that I think is a little unique with educators. And so uh, I was there for about 5 years with that program. I mean, they still have, even though I've left, a 100% pass rate on the national exam.
Wow.
Uh, so we were able to like I felt like I had done everything I could at that point for that program, and I had a great person who is also a first assist that could transition and take my place. And so somewhere in there, my friend Mona Bourbonnais out of Boise, out of the College of Western Idaho, hit me up and said, "Hey, we're thinking of starting a surgical first assist program. You started that program, like you are a first assist. Would you want to do it?" And I'm like, truth be told, I said, "Yeah, but I don't want to move to Boise right now. Like, I've already lived there. It's a little big for me. I'm a country boy." And so we said, if we develop it online, then I don't have to be there the whole time, right? I'm teaching online. I'm talking to students through Zoom and that sort of thing. And so we started that process. I guess it was 2022, and took me about a year to kind of get it going. And then we just ran our first cohort of students. They just graduated this last December. And then we just in January started our second class of students. So we're off and rolling. And that's kind of what brought me to here.
Okay.
Sorry. It's a lot.
No. Yeah, that's fine. How did that first class go for you? What were your expectations? Was it about what you expected? Do you feel like it went really well for your first class of students?
Yeah, it was trial by fire, because I really have a ton of, I had no experience in teaching a first assist program. I had experience being a first assist, and I had experience teaching, but starting a program from scratch and trying to figure that out. We don't operate in a silo, right? We need people that we've met that are professionals, or they're fantastic. If anybody knows Dale Powell out of San Juan College, the program down in New Mexico, fantastic guy. He was very helpful to me. Rebecca Hall, fantastic person. She was very helpful to me as well, to kind of get my feet under me. And then, we have a national curriculum that we follow, so that kind of helps drive how to build it. So you've got your accreditation on one piece, or on one hand, that gives you the guidelines on how to set up a program, as far as like, here are the things you need to do. And then you've got your curriculum on the other hand, and then you've got all these people that help you in the middle that kind of help fill in the gaps.
Nice. Okay. Well, that answers, let's see. I mean, we've already answered a first few of our questions that we had, John.
Talk a lot.
No, that's good. You're talking good information. I had no idea. It sounds like you were set up. You were in a good position to start a program because of your education experience and being in education already. And I want to say to that if there are first assistants that, like John and I, are first assistants, people that have been first assisting for some time, and you're like me, and you think, I don't really have any plans to retire. I don't want to retire. I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. And like you, I'm always, and John and I are similar in this way too, that we're always pushing ourselves to know more and do more. And what can I branch out into? If I ever get tired of first assisting in the OR, what can I do? And you're a perfect example of how you can take your career and your skill set and transfer it into another area of doing something else. And you're helping the next generation of first assistants come up and about, and surgical technologists as well. Both careers are fantastic. And I tell my new CSTs all the time that I come in contact with, you've chosen a fantastic career. Like, I hope you love it as much as I do, because you can go in so many different directions with it. And so it's exciting. And that answers my wonderment about how do you even start something like that. So it sounds to me like things just kind of fell into place, and the people in that area of the country are certainly lucky to have that there in that region.
Yeah, I agree. And if I can just add, you did ask me, how did that first year go? And like I said, a lot of trial by fire, but I felt really blessed to have a really great group of students in that first grad. It just so happened that they were all from the Boise area, within a few hundred miles of the Boise area. And I would say all of them had a lot of experience as surgical technologists. Like, they already had a lot of years in the operating room. And so they came to me already like hungry and ready to jump in and get it done. They stuck with me through all of my tedious case studies that I made them do. Once they got to their cases and collecting their cases and assisting in the OR, they just did fantastic. The amount of feedback I got from surgeons was unreal how good they were doing. And I was very pleasantly surprised. A lot of they were like, I did not expect them to suture as well as they do. I did not expect them to really look at like pre-op records in such depth, try to really understand what's going on with the patient. That's something that's very important to me, right? I mean, a surgical assistant is not just suturing and holding retractors. There's a
Absolutely.
ton. And I'm happy to report, that the way the accreditation process goes is the students can't sit for the exam until after we're accredited. So they had to wait a little bit. When we got our accreditation in January, immediately students started signing up. I had 12 graduates out of that program. 8 of them have taken the exam and 8 of them have passed it. And
Wonderful.
so very proud of them. They worked really hard to get to where they are. So
that's great. That is good news. John, jump in and ask a couple questions here.
Sure, great. Again, Rob, thanks for coming on the podcast. And I'm grateful to people like yourself that have skills like that to do that, because I don't think that way. My brain doesn't work that way. I could not navigate the accreditation process. I'd be pulling what little hair I have left out. It would be terrible.
what do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure it did.
I will.
Yeah. That's great. But, it's a testament to you too, to see a need and to take on the burden of starting something like that, because I'm sure, like you just said, it wasn't easy. But, we're in a profession that basically, we teach each other. It's an apprenticeship type style profession where education has become more formalized over the years. However, initially I met a lot of people that have been trained on the job, and a lot of the older members of the ASA and the NSAA, that's how they were trained. And that was their pathway. And then as our profession matures and moves forward, which I'm glad it's doing, we need programs like you. Because when I first became a first assistant in 2015, when I looked to go to school, there were only 7 accredited schools throughout the country. Now there was 13, and then Stark State University went defunct, and then you popped up. So I believe that makes 13 total, which is fantastic. Well, spread out all over the country, because people always don't have that option. And I also think it's a great testament to you that 8 out of your 12 have passed the test already is fantastic. I mean, that's an amazing ratio. And I'm sure it'll probably be, more than that once all is said and done. But yeah, exactly. But how is your class set up to run? I know you just did your first class, but is it like a start date at one point of the year, or is it a rolling entrance where you'll get more classes going as more students sign up, or is it just like we start in September, finish in June, so to say? I mean, I don't have the exact dates, but how's your program set up to work right now?
Yeah, we're a traditional community college, and so we operate on a semester system. And
Okay.
so because we share a lab with the surgical tech program there, we need to kind of balance like when my students could get in, when their students could get in. And so we decided to start the program in January. So the beginning of what we call the spring semester. And then they just go straight through the summer. So they do a 16-week spring semester. Then they do an 8-week summer semester, and then they do a 16-week fall semester, and then they graduate that next December. So it's a total. We call it a year program because of how the semesters are set up. But I mean, really, if you're looking at just time as the crow flies, so to speak, it's 11 months. Yeah, and so the way we have it set up is everything is delivered online. And so all of the didactic or the lecture portion is delivered online. I have everything set up through, if anybody's familiar with Blackboard and Canvas, like those learning management systems. I mentioned both because we're actually transitioning.
Okay.
But the students can log in, they can do their assignments, they can read, and there's resources on there. And then every week I have a live lecture via Zoom. And so students log in, and at the beginning I do more lecturing, just to kind of get them used to everything and the profession. And then as they meet in the live lab, then we kind of transition to more, hey, log on if you need something. I'm going to be lecturing if you want to attend. It's more optional because these are all working individuals. And so, sometimes if you're working 312s, that doesn't really gel with, me starting at 5 p.m. on Mountain Standard Time. Sometimes it does. Sometimes they can get out of a room. But we start in January, and then in March, students descend on Boise, Idaho, at the college in the lab. We do a week-long intensive lab where we're taking them through all sorts of skills. And I apologize, I'm probably jumping the gun on different questions.
No.
No, that's fine.
We go through everything, that the curriculum kind of lines out, and then we add a couple of things. So we go through like positioning, patient positioning, and all the different specialties. Pre-op prep, like not just room prep, but also pre-op assessment or patient assessment, kind of the foundations of that. We go over tourniquet placement, urinary cath, injecting local anesthetic, and then we go into like basic laparotomy skills, retracting, suctioning, cautery, things like that. Suturing basics. We take what the fundamental styles are. You're running sub-Qs, your vertical and horizontal mattress, all that stuff. But then we add a few, that we're kind of seeing more these days. Laparoscopic skills, target training. We use, if you're familiar with the lap sim, Surgical Science put out that virtual reality simulator. Students hate it at first, and then they grow to love it, right? Because it really improves your skills pretty quick. Trocar placement, and then we do a casting and splinting clinic as well at the very end.
Excellent.
Great. That's fantastic. So if somebody wanted to apply to your program, what are the prerequisites they need to have to apply?
Yeah, pretty minimal. They have to be certified through the NBSTSA as a CST. These are my current requirements. And they have to have at least a minimum of 2 years full-time working as a surgical technologist.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so as you said, just to recap though, most of your program is online, but then you do have to go to Boise to do a surgical skills lab
for 1 week. And then you go back to wherever you're from and you do your clinicals and
I think
classes.
That's another benefit of your program being located in Idaho, where it is, because you can draw from all those people that are on the West Coast. It might be more of a hardship for people to fly to the East Coast for a program that might require the same thing.
That being said, I have students this year. I have not quite half, but a good majority or a good group of them from outside of Idaho. We've got some from Alaska, Wisconsin, Georgia.
Great.
Yeah, so it's my hope, and what I always say with my program is our mission really is to just service the Treasure Valley first, the state of Idaho second, and then the rest of the country, right? We want to be able to offer this program to anyone that wants to do it and elevate their skill set, elevate their status. So
I think that's wonderful. That's definitely something that's needed because all of us have different situations in our lives. And if there's only 3 programs, it may not just, fit. There's no cookie cutter approach. One other question I had is, I know it's still a work in progress, like you mentioned, but do you have a cap at how many students per semester that can enroll?
Yeah. So the way I do accreditation says you have to have enough clinical spots for your students. So the way I kind of worked it in my brain that actually works really well is we have to have those clinicals locations already kind of set and earmarked before they start the program. So I say that we take 15, but if I have more qualified students and they have, I guess the okay from their institution to do their clinicals with them, then it's a simple filing paperwork to the accrediting body that we want to increase our cap.
Okay.
And so I say 15, but we can easily up that if we need.
Okay. Which didn't start to talk so long, Kelly, but yeah, that just brought up another question. So if a prospective student wants to apply, then who is responsible for getting that affiliation agreement? Is it a joint responsibility between you and the student, or your school and the student, or is it up to them to do the legwork and then just submit the paperwork to you?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. And so what I have is what I call it a clinical site approval form. So it's a sheet that gives me demographics on their OR, right? And so they essentially have to take their form to the OR manager and say, hey, I would like to do my clinicals here. That's basically the OR manager giving their blessing. Yes, you can be in my house, right, to do your clinicals. Once I have that, that's nothing formal. That's me knowing that they're on board. At that point, then that kind of gives us permission to start the affiliation agreement process on our end. So, my admin person that I work with, we get to contact people at their facility, and she contacts them and says, "Hey, we've got a student, the manager knows, or the director knows, we've got this form, we'd like to start the affiliation process with you." And then that takes a little bit of time. So we try to do that, everything on the front end. Yeah, so it's a little bit of a joint effort, right? I mean, I have one of my students is kind of struggling with his hospital currently, and so it's sometimes I have to say, "Hey, talk to your people, get them on board," right? Like this is what they're telling me, and this is as far as I can go. So you're gonna have to kind of push them a little bit on your end.
Great.
Yeah.
And one other question I had is, obviously they're required to have a certain number of surgical cases to graduate. What is your number and how does that break down? Like,
Yeah, so the ASA fourth edition curriculum, they state that students have to have a minimum of 140 cases, and 20 of those, if they have operating room experience, 20 of those have to be in general surgery. That's what I tell my students. And then I also give them the caveat, there is value in all specialties. And so if they're limited in the specialties they can do, so for instance, I can get my general surgeries, but I work in an orthopedic surgery center, right? I try to encourage them to branch out a little bit. Is there another OR? Is there another surgery center that maybe does urology, or GYN or something like that, plastics? And so far, my students have found like other modes of getting into cases. So I do have students that graduated, they got a lot of ortho, but because I wouldn't say guilt trip them, but I encourage them to get into other specialties. Then they upped their general game. They did some robotics. They went into urology a little bit, even though they were scared to do so. Like that's nerve-wracking if you're an ortho person and then you go into urology and you don't really know them that well. But then they went in and they thrived. So I would say most of my students get over the 140 cases, and they're fairly diversified throughout the specialties.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And I'll add to that with, I know with the program I went through, they gave us students a lot of autonomy. And in other words, they kind of, there was a lot of support, but they kind of said, it's your responsibility to find your preceptors, to approach surgeons, to get that diversity that you need. And and for a lot of us, I was going to say for me, but for a lot of people, that's way out of your comfort zone, especially professionally, because you like what you like doing, or you like what you know how to do, and it's very uncomfortable to go into something that you're not familiar with. But I will say that that concept alone prepares you so well, as you both know, for being a first assistant and for being, especially if you're going to travel, if you're going to be a PRM person going to different facilities, that prepares you so well to go in and approach these surgeons, look at them eye to eye and say, "I'm so-and-so, I'm here to help you today. I'm not very familiar with this case or this procedure, but I'm here to help you. I can do the fundamentals," and just kind of building on those communication skills and those skills of confidence, of exuding confidence in what you're doing, and kind of taking the bull by the horns, if you will, and just jumping in and doing it. So it sounds like that's pretty much the same setup, that the students are out there, they've got support with the school there, but they're kind of responsible for lining those preceptors up. And can they have other certified first assistants precept them, or do you require only surgeons to be preceptors?
So the accrediting body breaks it into two categories. You've got your preceptor, which is going to be any of your surgeons, right? They should be a EO or an MD. They can be a DPM. And then anyone else, CSFAs, NPs, PAs, like they're considered a preceptor delegate.
Okay.
And so one of the main hospitals in Boise, they require that before any of my students work with any surgeon, they've got to have that, just like I have a site approval form, I have a preceptor approval form as well. So that gives me information about the surgeon or the delegate. And then it also has information on there about here's what the student is responsible for. Here's what you would essentially be responsible for. And so one of our hospitals says that if they're going to work with any surgeon, they have to have one of those forms. So rather than just say, okay, if you're going to be at this hospital and you have to have one on every surgeon, I just tell all my students you have to have one on every surgeon. Right. A lot of filing for me, but I'm okay with that. I like to be organized because that's what we do. And so, yeah, so every preceptor delegate has a form on file.
Yeah.
So but you're right. They have to go, they have those relationships.
Right.
Exactly.
I'm not going to call the Mayo Clinic and be like, hey, you need to let my students in there, give them Dr. So-and-so. We're going to be like, God.
Right.
But if Jordan is working with this surgeon for every day that they're scrubbing for him, like they're going to be like, yeah, I'll take you on as a student. Right. So it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I have had some critical assistants out there say, oh, like you don't get their preceptors for them. Like that seems a little, whatever. Like, they have those
responsibility.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That was one thing.
Right. Like we're not the first assisting program in Idaho, but we are the only one in Idaho. There was one at the College of Southern Idaho that was a great program. I don't know why they're not doing it anymore, but they were accredited years ago, and they put out some really good graduates. So, but they're not there. We are.
Well, that was one thing that I did when I was a student is I got preceptor agreements from every surgeon I worked with, and it's just not the ones I liked, which is human nature. I mean, you want to be comfortable. You have a relationship with that surgeon. It's easy to ask him, but the surgeons you rarely work with that maybe aren't the nicest, it's hard to ask them. But I always looked at it as like, well, I don't always have the opportunity to work with every surgeon due to scheduling, or maybe that surgeon goes on vacation, or maybe they don't do certain cases, and I need to get certain cases. So this way, if I got it with everybody, I was covered, I was blanketed. So it worked out well. But I just can't stress enough how important and how grateful I am for you to do all that legwork to get accredited, because along the way in my career as both a surgical tech and a surgical assistant, I have met people that have invested in programs and then couldn't sit for the exam because they never got their accreditation. I've met 3 people that happened to as a surgical assistant, and I am probably 50 or 100 that happened to as a surgical tech, because for whatever reason, their school, private school too, by the way, and that's also the benefit of, I think, your program is it's a state, if I'm understanding correctly, it's a state school, correct?
Yeah.
So,
Community college that's funded by the state.
exactly. So that makes it incredibly expensive, because incredibly inexpensive, or much more affordable for people. Excuse me, I misspoke. But when I did my I'm dating myself here, but when I did my surgical tech program in 1992, I paid $1,200 for the program. It was a 1-year certificate program. 2005, I met a friend who was going through a private school, and they charged him $32,000 for that exact same program. Now, granted, it was an associate's degree, and he had to get a few extra classes, but that's out of touch for a lot of people. So I think that's great. And I assume, since you're a state school, you have an in-state tuition break for those that live in Idaho, and then another rate for those that live outside of Idaho.
Yeah, they actually break it down even further than that. Now we have what's called in-state, in-district, and that kind of covers that. That's a different price for all of the most populous counties. And then we have an in-state, out-of-district, which just raises the tuition just a little bit more, and then out-of-state as well. But in the West, they have the WUI program. It's the Western University Exchange Program. And if it qualifies, you have to apply for it. And if it qualifies, then I believe it gets you that in-state tuition, or gets you a break on out-of-state tuition. So
Great.
There are options, right? And, I think it's cheap enough to where the program itself, that a lot of students that I have, they just pay it. They pay, or their hospitals are sending them right through the program.
That's wonderful. So that brings up another topic, or another question, excuse me. So being that you're a state school, then I assume that students can apply for financial aid, be it a grant, a loan, or other financing options that are available to, being a state school.
Yeah. So when we have what we call a Title IV funding, that federal funding, they want it to be, I guess, more of a degree than just a specialized certificate. So that's originally what was the driving motivator to make it an associate's degree as well. So we have that option, and that qualifies us for that Title IV funding if my students so need. I've been pushing to get the college to let us up that game a little bit, get rid of the associate's degree, because a lot of my students coming in already have an associate's in surgical technology or whatever, and move it to a bachelor's degree. Our college is starting to, they already offer, I believe it's 2 bachelor's degrees in education and I think business. And so that would give us that opportunity for surgical assisting to offer that bachelor's degree. So that's my next challenge to take on. And so I'll definitely be advertising the crap out of that one.
Yeah, I'll sign up if you do. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How about
I know.
post?
Go ahead,
One
John.
last question, Kelly. Sorry.
Mhm.
What about post 11 GI Bill? Does that qualify?
Yes, it does.
Perfect.
Yeah, having that that associate's degree option certainly does. And a lot of hospitals, even, they do a lot of like reimbursement, like tuition reimbursement if you're going for an associate's degree or larger. And so that qualifies them as well.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, Kelly. I
Yeah.
didn't mean to step on you like
No,
that.
that's okay. He was talking about the associates with that program and how I was thinking how different that is from other schools where it is a certificate. It's 1 year and you get your certificate or a diploma. And then the program, John and I went through, then did develop the associate's degree program. And I took advantage of that the first year that they offered it. I went ahead and did it. And there was I felt like a vast, not difference, because obviously but the in-depth nature of the study material compared to the 1 year program was. Now, I will say as a caveat that I was in that first class, and I remember the director of that program saying, after I was done with it, I remember him saying that they actually got, I don't know how you say it, chastised from the accreditation board that the material was a little advanced for an associate's program.
Okay.
But it went more in depth, and this is just a question to your curriculum, but we went a lot more in depth to different specialties of surgery. So I have a textbook in there, operative gynecology, the cardiothoracic textbook that I'm telling you, I'm a good comprehensive reader. And when I tell you I would have to read a paragraph 2 or 3 times to understand what I read, I just felt like it was way over my head. But we did a radiology, understanding radiology. I got to tell you, it was harder. It was more difficult and challenging than I expected, but very, very valuable material. Do you feel like your program, is it covering those kind of things, like going more in depth and detail into the different specialties of surgery?
To a point, there was and this, it's going to fail me because I'm going to totally butcher this quote, but it's from professors at Harvard Medical School that essentially the point of this quote was like, I can teach you everything about medicine, but that's only going to get you so far. I need to teach you how to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I try to the way I organize my program. So I do that through a lot of case studies, and I outline, kind of what, the situation would be, the scenario would be. And I just ask students, here are your resources. You don't have to use just these resources, go above and beyond. But I want them to start thinking like a surgeon.
Correct.
That being said, you're not a surgeon, so don't be
Right.
the person that's like, I'm right all the time. But I want you to think like that, because if you can think like them, then you can anticipate what they need, right?
Yeah.
And you can anticipate what the staff needs, right? What the things they need to know, anesthesia included. And so that's kind of how we do it. I don't necessarily, I lecture in all the specialties. I lecture on certain anatomy, for example, like my advanced surgical anatomy course. I don't go body system by body system by body system, right? I elevate the nervous system. Like, what are the specific nerves? What are they doing? What are they innervating? That sort of thing. I want them to be able to identify when they're in an area, what blood vessels are what, things like that. And then when we get to advanced surgical procedures course, Then they're going into each specialty, reviewing the anatomy, reviewing like the specialties and what diagnostics go with different procedures, right? I want them to start thinking about, okay, if we're doing this, then this is what we would have to order. These are the type of labs
Mhm.
we, these are the type of, so that's kind of, it's kind of all over the place. I don't try to hone in on just, this textbook or that textbook, but
Yeah.
use your resources. And I do it once again, I do things in a little different way. I don't actually, their quizzes that they take, I tell them it's open book. Go for it. You use your resources. I want you to be able to look things up,
Right. Find
Mhm.
it.
right? As we approach the national exam, then we start testing like they're going to test. And I mean, even still, like to me, it's I'm kind of on a rant. Sorry. It's kind of one of those things where if we keep putting too much pressure on the grade, then they're going to end up like that's all they think about rather than like that's going to push them towards Quizlet, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And tell them is like, hey, this test, it's 100 questions and it's 50 plugs, right? If you do this, if you give this your all, you get the 50 points. I don't care
Mhm.
about the grade. I want you to hone in on what you don't know and improve on that, right? And so I think that kind of takes a lot of the pressure off of them and it puts more emphasis on learning like cleaning up the areas that they don't know.
Well, and it seems to me like you are teaching them. I'm really impressed with your style of teaching and with that philosophy that you have there. But it's just so. I mean, gosh, I learn well under somebody that
Right.
and as a student, as a younger student, many years ago, I would have learned very well under that type of philosophy and teaching. But it seems to me like you're also, whether it's intentional or not, you're also teaching them that that's how you have to, because even when you graduate, you're gonna go into a surgery at some point that you don't know anything about.
Mhm.
And if you know the procedure, then you're gonna be thinking, okay, you're gonna be thinking now about that area of anatomy that you're working on. You're gonna be thinking about those other peripheral things that you need to be thinking of. And it seems to me the way that you're teaching that is preparing them for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to add to that, like when they're doing their clinicals and I'm doing the evaluations, like I can't be in every hospital because they're all over the place. But what I have them do is I say choose a preceptor, have that preceptor call me. Like let's set up a time, and I've got a flow sheet that I kind of do it just like you're doing. We make this all of these questions kind of a conversation. And so as I'm talking to this surgeon, I'm asking them about how they're doing, and then I push them, I challenge them a little bit. Like, how's their anatomy?
Mm.
Their anatomy is great. I said, cool. Can you start asking them questions like you would ask a med student,
Mhm.
Mhm.
right? Challenge them, ask them, and if
Mhm.
they don't know, then they should be like, oh, I'm going to go look that up
Yeah.
now.
Right.
You know,
Exactly. Yep.
and really, I think what that's done is like my graduates tell me now, even when they go into a new case, they're like, yeah, if I haven't done that case, I really have to bone up on my anatomy because I know the surgeon's going to ask me about X, Y, or Z. You
Mhm.
know,
But
And
that's
the
just
thing
exactly right. Yeah, I mean, sorry,
yeah.
Kelly.
No,
That's
go
and I think that's so beneficial because I struggled in school because I don't learn the traditional way. Study this, remember this, take this test. And I think studies have shown since then that people learn in different ways. Some people are kinesthetic learners, some people, learn in other ways. So I think that is such a fantastic benefit because now you're teaching people how to find that information. So, like, Kelly just said, you've never done it before, but now you know how to go find the information that you need. So I just think that's wonderful.
right. And to your point, John, in my graduate degree, like it was in educational technology, more of an emphasis in adult learning.
Mhm.
And so what we found is that we've got the three learning styles that most people know, right? The visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic, right? Like I
Mhm.
need to have my hands on. And I don't think anyone is just one way of learning. We've got to hit them from
Right.
all the
Mhm.
different learning styles, right? We've got to get their hands on it. We've got to get them seeing it and hearing it. And then all of that, like different pieces of that start to make sense to them and it starts to kind of put it together.
Yeah. And again, I can't emphasize enough. I mean, I feel like if I were an instructor, I would tell my students that doesn't end. Going forward into your career, yeah, you're going to know a lot more in 10 years, a lot more, I hope, than you know now, but you're never going to know it all. And if it's been 3 years since I've done a neck dissection with a parotid, working on the parotid, I'm gonna need to go back and refresh myself on that anatomy. I haven't
Mhm.
done it in 3 years. I mean, so if I know I'm doing that case, guess what? I'm in my books, and John and I have an episode on keeping our
Mhm.
personal and professional resources up, and
Mhm.
you're always learning, and you have to be able to put your hands on something. And obviously, we live in an age where it's in the palm of our hand that we can look something up, but we have a wide range of textbooks and apps and these kind of things that we can, oh, I got to go look and see what nerves. I like to know my landmarks and landmines. What are we looking for? What
Mhm.
is that surgeon looking for? What are his boundaries of his surgical anatomy boundaries and all these things? That doesn't end. I've been doing this almost 13 years and it just does not end. There's always something new and exciting, something different that we're doing and working on. And it makes the career so fulfilling and fresh all the time. And if you're stale and stagnant where you are and you're doing the same kind of cases all the time, then move. Go somewhere else, get a PRN job somewhere, go find another area to stimulate
Mhm.
your brain and make it exciting. But it sounds like your program is really, and the way you teach is really fosters that philosophy and that way of thinking as well, and preparing your students to do exactly that.
Well, I certainly try.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And being
Yeah.
that you've worked in the field, do you stress the importance of students joining a membership organization like the ASA or the NSAA or the soon to be AAOS?
Yeah, right, right. I'm excited about that as well, by the way.
Yeah. Sorry.
Mm, yes, absolutely. More than that, I stress involvement. I'm a first assist and a surgical technologist, and I feel like in our professions, respectively, a lot of people, they want to see certain things happen, but they're not really that involved. And so I've always
Mhm.
challenged people when they come to me and say, "Oh, well, this organization doesn't do anything for me." And I'm like, "Well, what are you doing? What are you doing to kind of be involved, right? Carry that."
Mhm.
Um, and so I encourage my students to be that change, right? To get involved, sit idly by and watch things slip out of our hands. uh, Grab your buddy and grab a hold of it so it doesn't get away from us. I try to do my part. You two are doing your part. I mean, we all have uh, certain things that we can do, certain strengths that we can tap into to kind of help our profession along. And I think find what that is and do it.
Mhm.
But yes,
I agree.
I encourage my students to, and I always ask them, okay, who's going to the conference? And they kind of turn their cameras off. And I'm like, all right, turn them back on. I want hands. I want you to look at me and tell me why.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. That's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
All right. Well, Rob, I would like for you to tell if there's any buddy listening that is thinking this sounds like a program that I would be interested in going through and looking into to become a first assistant. I would like for you to tell us the first steps that they would take if John doesn't have any other questions that he wanted to get to.
I just had a quick question was how do you choose the textbooks for your program? But we can talk about that later if you want to give that information. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So, well, I'll actually, before I launch into a big thing about like the next steps and everything, I will just answer the textbook question. I choose based off of what the NBSTSA lists as their references.
Gotcha.
That's kind of but I do have, over there, but I have the new surgical assisting textbook by ASA, that I'm going through right now to try and see what I think of it as an instructor. So
Hmm.
far, so good. That's the one.
That's the one.
And I happen to know the person that kind of main authored it, and I think I just can't say enough awesome stuff about her. I think she's awesome.
Rebecca.
Uh, yeah, Rebecca.
Yep. She
And
pushed that.
so,
She did great. She was a tremendous force in getting that done because especially when Karen passed away, I mean,
yeah,
that was a disappointment.
yeah, I agree. So that's how I choose them. And as far as next steps,
Hmm.
Ellie, students, I think, or prospective students, I think, would just be best served to either just reach out to me, and they can reach out to me by email, which is just Rob Blackstone, ROBBLACKSTON @cwi.edu. Or just go to cwi.edu and search surgical first assistant and just go to the website. We will actually, I'm trying to capture the CSTs out there at the AST National Conference. So I actually have a booth set up
Wonderful.
that we will be there to provide information and a little bit of swag gifts to give away. So that way keeps people interested, and I can send them emails about, how upcoming application. Our application opens the 1st of September and it goes through December. And then I try to do a quick turnaround on going through applications and notifying, students that, hey, you've got a spot in the program, and start making your life decisions, organizing things.
Cool.
It's wonderful. And if it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and put your email that you just listed in the show description, as well as the link to the college as well, to the surgical first assistant program in the college. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll wrap that up. And Rob, again, we appreciate so much your time on this Sunday afternoon. We sure do. And I think it's just going to behoove our audience and anybody that's listening to know about your program, that we're right here on the cutting edge of the beginning of the program there in Idaho. And we're excited. We're excited for you. And we're excited to have a new, great, sounds like a great program for first assisting here.
I think
I sure like it.
Yep.
That's great. Is there anything that you wanted to add any final thoughts?
No, well, I mean, just thank you once again for having me on the podcast. And I really appreciate what the two of you are doing. From your first episode where you talked about there was a void that needed to be filled and I just love it. I think it's awesome. You guys are doing a great job. I encourage everybody out there to stay involved in our professions and keep the team as a focus, right? Sometimes you read the stupid Facebook things and that's and comments, and people get disgruntled or whatever. And I just say, you know what? Like, we're all the surgical team, and everybody takes all of us.
Yes, it does.
Exactly.
I have much love for our organizations, the NSAA, the ASA, AST, and I just say, we're more united. The more united we are, the stronger we are together. So
exactly.
Leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. We get that word out there for people who need it. So thanks again.
Thanks for listening today. We invite you to like and subscribe to this channel and leave a comment if you'd like. Feel free to look us up on Facebook at the Surgical Assistant Podcast, or email us at thesurgicalassistantpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time. Content of this podcast is in no way intended for diagnosing or treating surgical conditions. No patient-specific information is shared. All HIPAA guidelines will be adhered to.